Good morning, girls. This morning I'm going to do a short video on reducing fractions to their simplest form. Welcome to my kitchen classroom. Girls, you know that when we have an equivalent fraction, sometimes it's in its lowest terms or its simplest form, and sometimes it's in its higher terms. Now, we always like to express fractions or write fractions in their simplest form. So I'm going to show you this morning how to reduce fractions to their simplest forms. Let's go. The first one I want to look at, I want to say, let's take the fraction 5/10. Now, it is not, as it stands like that, it's not in its simplest form. So, we need to reduce it. We need to make it smaller and in its simplest form. So, if we look at the note that I sent you, it says that to reduce a fraction to its simplest form, you must ask yourself, what is the biggest number which will divide equally into both the numerator and the denominator? And with 5/10, we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 5. It is the biggest number that will divide equally into the numerator and the denominator. So we can say 5 divided by 5 is 1, 10 divided by 5 is 2. Therefore, we can say 5/10 is exactly the same as a half. The only difference is that a half is in its simplest form and the 5/10 isn't. Let's look at another one. I'm going to say 12/14. Now, let's look at it carefully. If I look at both of those numbers, I can see that 12 and 14 are both even numbers. So they are divisible by 2. There isn't another number that will divide equally into the 12 and into the 14. And so the biggest number that will divide equally into that is 2. So I'm going to divide the 12 by 2 and the 14 by 2. And I'm going to come up with 12 divided by 2 is 6 and 14 divided by 2 is 7. So 14/12 and 6/7 they mean exactly the same. The only thing is that 6/7 is in its simplest form. Now, how do we know when something's in its simplest form? There is no other number that can divide equally into both the numerator and the denominator besides 1. And if I have a look, 7 is a prime number. So it has got no other numbers will divide equally into it unless it is 7 or 1. Let's look at it. I have got 15/20. We can see that it is not in its simplest form. But if we want to reduce it to its simplest form, let's just look at that fraction carefully. We can see the 15 and the 20 are both multiples of 5. So, it stands to reason that if I divide the numerator and the denominator by 5, I can reduce it. 15 divided by 5 is 3, 20 divided by 5 is 4. So 15/20 and 3/4 mean exactly the same. Now, 3/4 cannot be reduced any further. And I'm going to do one more and then I'll show you just a little secret. And this one is 20/24. Now, this is also not in its simplest form. And then I think to myself, well, there's 20 and 24. They're both even numbers, so they are divisible by 2. But is there not something else? Is there not a number bigger than 2 that can divide into? Yes, well, let's take 4. Let's divide both the numerator and the denominator by 4. It's the biggest number that will divide equally into both the numerator and the denominator. So we can say 20 divided by 4 is 5. 24 divided by 4 is 6. Okay, now Let's have a look at the fractions that we have dealt with today. In my previous screen, I dealt with a half, and we've got 3/4, 5/6, and there was also 6/7. Now, all of these fractions are in their simplest form, and I want you to look carefully. When you see that the numerator and the denominator are only one number apart, like 3/4, 5/6, 6/7, 1/2, there is no number besides 1 that will divide equally into both the numerator and the denominator. So then you know that it is in its simplest form. Girls, I hope that you have understood this. If you read your notes, and you go over this video again, I am quite sure that you will be able to do this.